And let's get started. Rahm Emanuel knows just how tough it is to enter the White House on Inauguration Day and try to set up a president's agenda. He did it. Emanuel was President Obama's first chief of staff, and when he walked into the White House on January 20th, 2009, he had the huge additional challenge that the American economy was imploding with the worst global recession since the 1980s, perhaps since the 1930s, already underway. So how would he grade the first 5 months of the current resident of 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, his chief of staff, the rest of the administration? Joining me is the mayor of Chicago, Rahm Emanuel. So, Rahm, when you're watching them, what do you think?
Thank God I'm mayor of the city of Chicago. No, here's what I would say, Fareed, is I used to tell President Clinton this, which is, if we knew in the first year of the first term what we knew by the first year of the second term, we all be geniuses. Nobody is really ever ready. The only thing that prepares you is a campaign. But you have a president that never held office, and basically everybody in the White House but a few have never actually been there. And while you focused on me from President Obama, I was senior advisor to President Clinton, but you also had other members of Tom Donilon, National Security Staff. Ron Klain, who was Vice President Biden's chief of staff, was in the White House before. You had a number of people who have been there that have the experience of the rhythm of a White House and knowing how to constantly weigh policy against politics against the public or public relations. And that's the kind of three-dimensional chess you have to do. And I would just say they've made some choices that I think will now have consequences that are not just immediate but long-term. And they need some victories, and I keep emphasizing that victories beget victories, losses beget losses, and I think that they've made some mistakes that have exacerbated already a troubling, fragile coalition and political position of a president.
So what is a White House like in a situation like this? You saw the Clinton White House during the impeachment process. Is it a kind of bunker mentality? Is it a siege mentality? What do you think is going? Is it possible for people to just execute policy and to plan policy, or is the investigation taking over everything?
Well, if anybody tells you the investigation doesn't kind of permeate, they're not being honest with you. You have to fight it, but it doesn't mean you're going to succeed, but you have to fight it. And what that means is you have to set up a separate communication, separate legal, separate kind of congressional and outreach. And then a total White House operation. Now, I think, if you go back, we did a pretty good job under the Ken Starr investigation for President Clinton, but if we sat there and high-fived each other and said, oh, we kept it Chinese wall, that's not honest. It's just too dominant a factor. It's very hard to keep an investigation of the presidency and the people in the White House separate from day-to-day operations. Very hard, but it is what you have to do.
Do you understand the sort of Bannon strategy, which seems to be go for your base because you'll always have them. These guys at the center, they'll never come to you, and that's the theory. It has begat a 36% approval rating. So it seems to me it doesn't work. But what do you think?
Well, it may. Well, you have to separate this. There are different needs from congressional to your local party officials versus your statewides. It may work for President Trump, but it does not work for the rest of the Republicans. And his relationship with his voters may not be transferable. We're going to find out some stuff pretty soon about as it relates to other congressional races, other elections in both New Jersey and Virginia for governor, etc. Their strategy is very straightforward: get their voters and keep them on amphetamines, highly charged. I'm not sure in where the battlegrounds for Congress are, the battlegrounds are for the state houses. That's going to be an electoral strategy for success up and down the Republican ticket. And I think it's not just a strategy. There's a set of policy decisions that are slowly but surely alienating persuadable voters. And I think that basically, as far out as you really can see now, which I don't think you can, this election in 2018 will be a referendum on Trump. Democrats are going to say we're going to be a check on this president, a checkmate, and the Republicans, and we're going to accuse the Republicans of being a blank check. And that's basically it.
So explain something to me. A puzzle I've had with President Trump is the
One
policy puzzle. Why wouldn't he, when he came into office, have done what he said he was going to do throughout the campaign, announce the creation of Make America Great bonds, 40-year, 50-year, 30-year, whatever you want to call them, raise money at the lowest rates really you're ever going to see, and actually build infrastructure, putting people to work, putting his base to work? Why has he not done it?
Fareed, I'll give you one up on that, if I can. Think about his presidency and the trajectory of his presidency had he started on the one area that was bipartisan rather than the one area like healthcare, which was going to be polarization. He'd have Democrats in a position we'd have to either decide to cooperate, and therefore our base would be angry, or work with him on building something. His entire presidency would be focused on the one thing he pledged, which is jobs. He decided to do the exact opposite, which is to go to a set of policies on health care that would be divisive and would be unproductive. And as somebody who's worked on health care, it was going to be a cul-de-sac. And that's exactly what's happened, politically and economically, and it's wrong. So my view is he made both a political and a policy blunder of the first order, which is what rookies make when they come right out of the box. And
do you think that it was because he listened to people like Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell who said this is what the Republicans want?
Yeah, I think a lot of people, I don't know. I only know what I read, so I don't know I know, the one thing I do know is that what you read is 10% usually of the ice above the water level. You don't know everything below. You know, but at the end of the day, you know, the president makes the call. He can listen to all the advice, but there's only one guy that makes the call. Had he started on infrastructure, one, it would have been good for the economy, two, it would have been bipartisan, and three, he would have been focused on his core message, which was jobs. The talk about health care vis-a-vis his base, I think misread what his base wanted. I think it was actually a total misreading of the Republican base. He actually changed the Republican base, and the Republicans in Congress aren't up to speed with what his base is. Now, that's a political analysis, but it is actually, if you look at the history of
your point is his base is actually
more jobs-focused, more America-focused.
And working class anxious about health care, not really interested in the ideological debate about repealing Obama.
Totally misreading, I think, what the base is. And therefore, but he made that call. And I think there is still fundamentally a dire need and a desire, both a dire need and a desire, to build a 21st century transportation system for a 21st century economy. You can see places that are succeeding, that are investing in the future, and you can see people that aren't investing in what's happening to their economy. And
but it will cost money.
Totally. I mean, you can't get, it costs money to build it, it's going to cost money to build the future.
Back in a moment, much more to discuss with Rahm Emanuel, including how he is making Chicago's infrastructure great again in America's third largest city. You would be forgiven if you had missed entirely the president's infrastructure week at the beginning of the month. After all, the week just happened to coincide with the most anticipated testimony since Watergate, Jim Comey's. Trump announced that America deserved the best infrastructure in the world and said in his most Trumpian manner,
"It's time to rebuild our country, to bring back our jobs, to restore our dreams, and yes, it's time finally to put America first."
In calling attention to America's infrastructure problems, President Trump finds himself with some strange bedfellows like my guest, Chicago Mayor Rahm Emanuel. So what do you think of Trump's plan?
Well, I don't know it. The one thing that came out of it is somewhat the privatization of the aviation system. I fundamentally believe you're not going to get from here to there a 21st century transportation system for a 21st century economy without money. I'm open to public and private. We've done some of that, but it doesn't replace public. I'm for an increase in the gas tax. It's real money for real problems that will solve real problems. 1994 was the last time we actually increased as a country the gas tax, and we didn't index it to inflation. If you asked President Clinton, he would have told you that was a mistake. So a lesson when I became mayor, we raised the water rate over a 4-year window and then indexed it to inflation. I don't want another mayor or city council to handle that politics. It's $4.9 billion over a 10-year window, 900 miles of water pipe, 670 miles of sewer pipe, 2 largest water filtration plants in the United States and pumping stations will be totally rebuilt. And then it's indexed so the work continues.
Rahm, you have found a way to make Chicago's infrastructure great again,
Yeah.
without much help from the federal government. Explain how.
Some yes, some no. On the airports, we basically, when we're done with our new runway system, O'Hare will have added Midway's capacity, and we did that with federal help.
Two new runways.
Yes, 2 new runways, but when the system is complete, we're the only city in the United States that basically built a 3rd airport in the last decade, because we're adding Midway's capacity to O'Hare. That's how you have to look at that.
And an express train line to the airport.
Well, we're now exploring that, and we'll be actually working on an RFP exactly on that. Our mass transit system, where half the track will be new by 2019, a third of the, about 40 individual stations will be totally new. Every rail car by 2019 will be totally new or rebuilt. We have 4G, the first system, completely, the first mass transit system with 4G on it. We've done that with local, state, and federal resources.
How many
but
people?
the school modernization, we're doing that alone as a city.
And you point out this means lots of jobs for people in Chicago.
We did about 60, if you do it over a 4-year window, this next leg is around 50 to 60,000 construction jobs, all building trade jobs. In the first 4 years, it was also a similar kind of 52,000 jobs. We are now, last April was our lowest unemployment rate in April in the history of the city of Chicago. And I'll give you other data points. 5 years in a row, #1 city in corporate relocations in the United States of America. 5 years in a row, the #1 city for direct foreign investment in the United States of America. And most important as it relates to this, every year for the last 5 years, the city of Chicago's economy grew faster than the United States, faster than New York, and faster than D.C. That's JLL economist. And I do believe our investments in our transportation system and capital has created a foundation for greater and faster economic growth than the country as a whole.
Rahm Emanuel, pleasure to have you on as always.
Thank you.